Imagine rushing toward a heavy glass door. Like you are late, you're super stressed, and you just need to get inside.
Oh, we have all been there.
Right. So you grab the handle and you just yank it with your entire body weight, and like nothing happens.
Nothing. It doesn't budge.
Exactly. So you pull harder, you're digging your heels in, getting increasingly furious, wondering why the universe is like actively locking you out today of all days.
Right, taking it completely personally.
Totally. And then, you finally take a breath, you step back, and you look at the little metal sign right above the handle, and it says push.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The classic push-pull dilemma.
Yeah. You just tap the glass with one finger, and it swings open effortlessly. So today is Saturday, April 11th, 2026. And we are looking at the exact psychological and apparently cosmic difference between frantically pulling that door and simply taking a breath to read the sign. Okay, let's unpack this because we have a really cool deep dive today.
We really do. We are dissecting an incredibly unique combination of sources. First, we have a literal prescriptive set of astrological instructions from this creator, Tarot by Heko. And it's detailing a very specific planetary alignment called Mars conjunct Neptune.
Which sounds intense already.
It is. But alongside that, we have this piece of sci-fi called a StoryScope. And this narrative actually takes that abstract astrological energy and, well, it builds an entire fictional world around it. It forces its characters to navigate those exact cosmic rules.
I just love how this pairs up because whether you follow astrology super closely or you're just a fan of a really good thought-provoking sci-fi concept, both of these texts are circling the exact same human struggle.
Yeah, they absolutely are.
It's that painful tension, right, between wanting to force an outcome and having that actual discipline to just wait for true clarity. So our mission today is to decode the literal advice from the astrological text and then watch the mechanics of it unfold in this fictional city. Aethra, I think it's called.
Yes, Aethra. And, the astrological premise opens with a very direct warning. It states that aligning our personal desires with our broader soul's directives requires, like, an absolute surrender of the ego.
Wow. Absolute surrender. Not easy.
Not at all. We're told to listen to intuition rather than the conscious mind. And crucially, to abandon the need to control outcomes entirely. And the story tests this premise immediately by dropping us into Aethra, which the text describes gorgeously, by the way.
Oh, the imagery is wild.
Right. It describes it as a city suspended between stars like a thought not yet spoken.
I mean, that line alone sets the tone perfectly. It's a city defined by anticipation, like a breath held right before a sentence begins.
Exactly.
And in this suspended city, the narrative hits us with what it calls the first signal, but it's not, a siren or a flashing light. The text describes the signal as a profound silence.
A precise subtraction, it calls it.
Yeah, a precise subtraction. It's as if the universe just muted one essential underlying frequency of reality. And we meet our two main characters who react to this sudden void in completely opposite ways.
First, we have Kael, and his title is A Blade of Accord.
A blade of accord sounds very intimidating.
Very. He is a soldier, essentially. He's trained to take decisive action the exact moment others hesitate. And the world building around him is fascinating. He wears this living armor that is physically shaped by the memory of his past decisions.
Wait, really? The armor actually changes shape based on his choices?
Yes. Every choice he has ever made leaves a structural trace in the metal. So for Kael, strength is defined by swiftness, by looking at chaos and imposing order.
Okay, and then we have Lyra. She is a listener, and she operates on a totally different wavelength. She wears no armor at all, just these pale, weightless threads.
Just threads, yeah. Total vulnerability.
Right. Her entire philosophy revolves around attuning to that silence, hearing the shape of what has been removed. So when this massive, unsettling silence hits the city, Kael instantly wants to mobilize and, fix the disruption. He tells Lyra that waiting invites decay.
And Lyra counters by saying, the silence is not an enemy to be conquered. It is a frequency to attune to.
Exactly. And reading this dynamic, I kept thinking about how our real world functions, right? Because Kael's mindset is the one we actually promote and reward in society.
Understand.
He's the proactive one. He's the guy who gets things done while all the philosophers are paralyzed by overthinking. I picture Kael like a frantic office worker.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Right, so his computer screen freezes during a really big presentation, and instead of just, letting the processor catch up, he starts aggressively clicking the mouse 50 times, convinced that doing something is better than doing nothing.
Yes, yes.
And Lyra is the IT tech standing behind him, calmly saying, "Take your hand off the mouse and just wait."
What's fascinating here is that the psychology behind that impulse to keep clicking is exactly what the astrological source is highlighting. Let's look at the mechanics of this planetary alignment because it maps perfectly to your IT analogy.
Let's hear it.
So Kael is the embodiment of Mars. In astrological terms, Mars is the engine. It's the planet of action, drive, warfare, and, well, the sheer desire to assert your will onto the physical world.
So pure ego.
Pure ego. It is the ego saying, I am uncomfortable, therefore I will act to remove the discomfort. Now, Lyra represents Neptune. Neptune is the ocean. It's dissolution, deep intuition, the higher self, and a surrender to forces vastly larger than human comprehension.
Wow, so they are really polar opposites.
Completely. Think of these planets like overlapping radio transmissions. Mars is broadcasting a tight, aggressive, fast-paced drumbeat. Neptune is broadcasting a sweeping ambient wave. When they conjunct, when they occupy the same space, they are fighting for control of the same speaker.
That clash of frequencies has got to be deafening for someone like Kael.
Oh, it is terrifying for him. When the screen freezes or when the silence hits Aethra, the ego panics. The human brain is wired to perceive ambiguity as a threat.
Right. We hate not knowing what's going on.
Exactly. We click a mouse 50 times, not because it actually sends a helpful command to the computer, but because the physical act of clicking temporarily soothes our own anxiety.
It gives us the illusion of agency.
Exactly. There's a phenomenal quote from Lyra in the text where she pinpoints this exact flaw in Kael. She says, people rely on you to act with clarity, not merely to act.
That distinction is everything, acting with clarity versus acting as a defense mechanism against anxiety.
Yes.
And the astrology text explicitly warns that divinely inspired action only arrives when the ego steps completely out of the way. If you just act to relieve your own discomfort with the silence, you are walking straight into a trap.
A massive trap.
And the sci-fi narrative doesn't just, leave that as a philosophical debate.
Yeah.
It forces Kael to test his theory, and we get to watch the fallout. We move directly into the backlash of forced action.
Right, so the setting shifts to the Council of Aethra. The silence has caused real structural damage at this point. There are fractured pathways and collapsing probabilities manifesting right in the physical space of the chamber.
Which is such a cool sci-fi visual.
It really is. And Kael demands they deploy corrective forces to what is called the Eastern Vector. Lyra warns him again, of course. She suggests that injecting urgency and fear into an already unstable system will only deepen the distortion.
But Kael is resolute. He literally declares, I will not stand idle, and he marches out to force the field back into place. Now, here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Let me push back on the framing here for a second, because this is where the logic feels counterintuitive to me.
Sure. What do you mean?
Well, the astrological reading warns against pushing a selfish agenda, right? It says that forcing an outcome will lead to feeling completely disillusioned and confused. But look at Kael's motivation. He is a blade of a cord. He is marching out into a collapsing vector, risking his own life to stop his city from being torn apart. I struggle to see how saving thousands of people qualifies as a selfish agenda. I mean, isn't he fundamentally doing the noble thing by refusing to stand by while things fall apart?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at what selfish means in the context of human psychology and ego. The selfishness is not located in the ultimate goal of saving the city.
Oh, yeah.
The selfishness is in his arrogant assumption that he alone has the right to dictate how and when the universe resolves the problem.
Oh, wow. He has a savior complex, essentially.
Exactly. A savior complex rooted in a deep intolerance for uncertainty. Kael is acting from a place of fear. He is refusing to accept that there are forces at play larger than his own armor and his own willpower.
That makes so much sense.
When he storms the Eastern Vector to force the field, he isn't truly serving the city. He is serving his own desperate need to end the suspense. He is trying to conquer the silence. And the astrology text warns that when we operate this way, when we try to bulldoze reality to fit our timeline efforts, are likely to lead nowhere.
And the physical backlash in the story is like a perfect metaphor for that psychological collapse. Kael gets to the Eastern Vector, and it is just burning with instability.
Chaos everywhere.
Yeah, and he uses his armor to forcefully clamp down on the field, demanding coherence. And for one single second, it actually seems to yield. But then the system aggressively rejects his imposed order.
It fights back.
It does. He pushes harder, doubling down, and the entire field shatters. The way the tag describes this backlash is incredible. It is not a physical explosion, it's a total collapse of logic and direction. The story says up became inward, forward dissolved into 1,000 indistinguishable options.
That is the literal manifestation of the disorientation the astrology warned about. I mean, up became inward is such a brilliant way to describe cognitive overload.
It really is. It makes my head spin just thinking about it.
Right. When you force a solution onto a complex system that you haven't taken the time to understand, you don't fix the system,
Yeah.
you break your own ability to navigate it. The narrative notes how Kael's rigid armor begins flickering erratically.
Oh, because it's built on his past decisions.
Exactly. It's an archive of known quantities. But he is facing an anomaly that requires him to process the unknown. Because he tried to conquer it instead of listening to it, his past strategies are rendered entirely useless. He has lost his compass.
He hits rock bottom. He is just drifting in this shattered space. His thoughts are fracturing into a million doubts, and every attempted decision just multiplies the confusion.
Total ego death.
Yeah, he is experiencing that complete ego death the astrological reading mentioned. The old way of operating is dead.
And this brings us to the most crucial pivot in the deep dive. How does Kael survive this? How does he transition from a broken soldier into what the astrology text calls the embodiment of the enlightened warrior?
He survives by finally executing the mechanical shift that Lyra advocated for at the very beginning. When his armor fails and his logic collapses, he stops reaching outward to control the space around him.
He gives up the fight.
He does. He turns inward. He stops trying to fix the external fracture, and he discovers a vast open expanse within his own mind. The narrative says he hears a realization in that internal space. And it's not, a booming voice or a command. It is just a quiet knowing. The text reads, "You cannot force alignment. You can only become aligned."
Let's break down the psychology of that realization, because it is the linchpin of the entire Mars-Neptune conjunction.
Let's do it.
Moving from forcing alignment to becoming aligned is the shift from the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight panic mode, into the parasympathetic nervous system.
The rest and digest state.
Exactly, the state of rest and digest.
Yeah.
When you stop flooding your brain with the panic of needing to control everything, your peripheral vision actually opens up. You start noticing the actual shape of the problem instead of just your own fear of it.
And the physical change in his armor reflects that completely. As he lets go of the desperate need to dominate the field, his armor shifts from a rigid, heavy structure into a state of fluid resonance.
Fluid resonance, such a great term.
Right. He stops imposing and he starts allowing. And simply by adjusting his own internal frequency, a pathway through the shattered vector is revealed to him. He follows it, and the field finally stabilizes.
But it stabilizes through coherence, not through correction.
Exactly. And right when you think the story is wrapping up with a nice, neat bow, it hits us with a massive time jump.
This is where the source material gets intensely practical. The story moves forward exactly 7 cycles, or 7 days. And this ties directly back to the astrological blueprint.
Yep, the timeline matches perfectly.
The text outlines that the Mars-Neptune conjunction, that struggle with ego, surrender, and finding fluid resonance, is only step 1. Exactly 7 days later, the cosmos serves up step 2, a Mars-Saturn alignment.
And the shift in tone is jarring. I mean, if Neptune was the ocean and the silence, Saturn is the concrete. The story describes the arrival of this second signal, not as a quiet subtraction, but as a heavy, undeniable pressure.
It doesn't ask for intuition. It demands substance, endurance, and form.
Yes. Kael returns to the council chamber. His armor is entirely transformed now. It is steady, emitting a deep, constant light instead of that reactive flicker from before. He tells the leaders that the field is stable but fragile, and now they must build.
And he makes a point to say they must build not from urgency or panic, but from the alignment they just fought so hard to achieve.
Right. So what does this all mean? It is exactly like pouring a concrete foundation for a house. Step 1, the Neptune phase, was all about clearing the site. You have to remove the debris, stop fighting the landscape, find the perfect level, and surrender to the actual topography of the ground.
You can't force a flat surface over a jagged rock.
No, you have to align with what is there. But step 2, the Saturn phase, is the brutal, slow process of pouring the concrete. You have to do the heavy lifting, and then, which is the hardest part for someone like the old Kael, you have to patiently wait for it to cure.
Oh, the waiting.
If you rush it, if you get anxious and try to frame the walls while the foundation is wet, the entire structure cracks and you lose everything.
This raises an important question, because that analogy perfectly captures the friction of this alignment. We are biologically wired to crave instant gratification.
Totally.
When we put in effort, we want an immediate result. Saturn denies that dopamine hit. The astrological text is incredibly specific about the dangers of step 2. Saturn is the ultimate taskmaster of the zodiac. It rules over time, structure, limitation, and hard work.
So it's not a fun planet.
No, not at all. The reading warns that during a Mars-Saturn alignment, we are highly susceptible to feeling deeply frustrated, angry, or resentful if our desires are not immediately fulfilled. Mars still wants to move fast, but Saturn forces you to lay every single brick by hand.
What makes the conclusion of the StoryScope so profound is watching how Kael navigates this agonizingly slow phase. Because Lyra asks him a very pointed question. She says, what happens if the progress is slow? What if the building process tests your patience?
And Kael, the guy who just 7 days ago was screaming, "Waiting invites decay," just smiles and replies, "Then it is working."
Then it is working. Wow.
That forward response proves that his transformation in the first step was permanent. He fundamentally unlinked speed from success. He no longer views resistance, slowness, or heavy pressure as enemies to be smashed through with a sword.
Right. He recognizes them as the necessary weight required to build something real.
Exactly. The story explicitly notes that alignment opened the path, but it did not remove the effort required to walk it. The work was still grueling. But Kael is able to persist without forcing because he remembered the lesson of the silence.
That he is not separate from the field. He stops fighting the environment because he realizes he is a part of it. It perfectly synthesizes the takeaway from both the astrological reading and the sci-fi narrative.
It really does.
I feel like this entire deep dive really boils down to one mechanical truth. Clarity is not a product we manufacture through brute force. It's a reality we uncover when we stop resisting what we already know on an intuitive level. True, impactful action actually flows quite effortlessly once you are genuinely in alignment with the situation, rather than just frantically pushing against the glass door hoping the hinges will eventually break.
Which they won't.
Yeah.
And it serves as a vital reminder that listening is an incredibly active state. We often mistake listening or waiting for passivity or weakness,
Oh, all the time.
but holding space for the unknown, tolerating the anxiety of silence, and allowing the correct path to reveal itself requires an immense amount of neurological discipline. Arguably, it requires far more strength than simply giving in to the panic and lashing out with forced blind action.
Absolutely. It takes profound strength to leave the mouse alone and let the system process. So as we wrap up today's deep dive, I want you to look at how these mechanics are operating in your own daily routines.
Take a look inward.
Yeah. When you are hit with a sudden fracture in your plans, a project stalls, a relationship hits a silent patch, or a career path suddenly loses its momentum, how do you physically and mentally react?
Are you immediately trying to force a fix, terrified that standing still means you are failing?
Exactly. Or are you capable of taking a breath, stepping back, and attuning to the silence to see what is actually missing?
Because the way we navigate those silent, frustrating pauses doesn't just dictate the outcome of the immediate problem. It permanently alters our own internal architecture.
Think about Kael's living armor. The story made it very clear that the metal he wore was shaped by the memory of his past decisions. Every time he chose fear, the armor became rigid. Every time he chose resonance, it became fluid.
It's a beautiful metaphor.
It really is. And I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over today. If your own daily reactions to stress and uncertainty were forging a visible suit of armor around your body right now, what shape is it taking? Is it thick, rigid, and reactive, built only to bulldoze your way blindly through the world? Or is it fluid, resonant, and strong enough to simply listen? Think about it. We will catch you next time.